Okay, here we are again. We're at the bottom of page 10 now, and we just talked about dot plots. So remember, we're talking about the three different graphs to visualize numerical data. So we first talked about dot plots. Now we're going to talk about histograms. So in histograms, what we do is we group our data into different intervals. We don't just look at individual dots like we did with dot plots. These intervals are called bins, and the width of the interval is called the bin width. We count the frequency of the data values that fall into each bin. And each rectangle, then, in a histogram has the following properties. Consecutive bins touch. The first value in each bin is recorded on the horizontal axis. The height of each rectangle corresponds to the count. Okay, so this is an example of a histogram here. We're now on page 11. So this is actually back to our soccer players data, right? We had female professional soccer players and the amount of games played. So what we've done in this histogram, instead of looking at individual dots, we grouped all of the data values that were between 0 and 5. Notice that this is cut off at 5. Now, the value 5 is actually in the next bin because the first value is in the bin, the last value is not in the bin. So from 0 to 4, essentially. Now, these are integers, but if this was not, it was different real numbers. It would go to 4.99999, etc. But from 0 to 4 in this case, there were 4 soccer players that played between 0 and 4 games, and then there were 5, right? The frequency is the count. There were 5 players that played between 5 and 9 games, and then there were 12 players that played between 10 and 14 games. 14 players that play between 15 and 19 games, etc. Okay? So it's real easy to do. I'm going to go ahead and quickly show you how to do this. We'll go back to our StatCrunch data where I had the goals here. Again, quickly, you just go to Graph. Instead of dot plot, which was what we did before, we're going to histogram. And we select the variable we want to graph, which in this case was goals. And I'm doing a type frequency. I want the frequency on the y-axis, and everything else is not important right now. I just want to get you to understand how to quickly create the graph. And this is the exact same graph. It's in your notes. Okay, maybe spread out a little bit like that when I pasted it. Okay, so back to the notes. What features do we notice about this? And what is the default bin width created by StatCrunch? Now notice I didn't tell it to do a bin width of 5. StatCrunch just did it by itself. So each bin is a rectangle with the height being the number of data values in that bin. Default bin width here is 5. So let's look at the data again. But this time there's a new bin width. And hopefully you can see, you'd have to kind of look at this yourself, and I wrote the answer here already, but what is this bin width? So notice that 5 is in the middle of this third bin. So really this is going from 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, etc. So the bin width here is 2. Now remember, 2 is actually in the second bin, right? The first value is in the bin, the last value is not. So if we went back to StatCrunch again, and I just, so what I can do instead of creating a whole new one, I'm going to edit this. So go to Options, Edit, and I'm going to change the bin width here. So it says the width is optional. That allows it to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to 2. Then hit Compute. And this again is what you see in your notes now. So back to notes. More specific notes on the bin width. A width that is too narrow can show too much detail. Notice that the shape starts to get lost here a little bit with this width of 2. If I go up to 5, I can see a nice shape. I feel like I'm running my hands over it smoothly. I can see the shape. Okay, up here it kind of goes up and down, probably a little bit too narrow on the bin width. Too wide though can hide detail. So it's something you have to play with. Most technology chooses the default bin width for initial look at the data, but one should always experiment with adjusting bin width to see if anything interesting appears.